Welcome back. I'm Sean Fitzgerald, the author of both Sinner's Pass and A Fold to Extinction. Today, we have a great opportunity for you guys to meet somebody brand new. I'm going to hand this over. Faith, please introduce yourself and where everybody can find your work.
Hi, I'm Faith. I'm the artist and owner of One Eye Monsters. You can find silly comics, just random art, and more content that's going to be released. You can
And
find
Faith,
me on.
you started your career in video game development. Is that right?
Yes.
Awesome. I just wanted
And
everybody to be aware of that.
yes, I have a game that I'm going to release, but I have no due date yet, so I didn't want to say that. But I'm really excited to release that soon.
Awesome. Well, today we are talking about Resident Evil. So Resident Evil isn't a singular entity like I grew up with it. It's both a video game, a movie, and now a series of novels. For today's conversation, just because we can go down a lot of rabbit holes with this, we are going to focus primarily on the first four games, the Milo Jovovich movies, or movie. I'm going to just limit it to the first one. And then Welcome to Raccoon City. We won't talk about the travesty that was the TV show. That's probably for another day.
Oh my God.
You can't deny it. I don't know what they did with that show, and I'm not really surprised that it got killed where it was.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with Resident Evil, the very first game, the game that kicked it off. Survival horror, for those who don't know, it is essentially putting the player in a situation with limited resources, in a general scary element. You can say that it started before Resident Evil, probably in the early 80s, but Resident Evil really brought it to the forefront. So I'm going to ask you, Faith, when it comes to survival horror, what was it from a video game side of it that brought Resident Evil to the forefront of survival horror?
I think back then, the zombie genre was new, unlike right now, where you can find so much zombie content. It was scary. Representation on TV. We only had those few movies that came out, like Night of the Living Dead, and seeing in a video game, especially that one scene in the beginning of the first game when you first see a zombie and it turns around and looks at you. It really launched the zombie genre, I think, because after Resident Evil, it became more, but it became more mainstream than the subculture it used to be.
Right, and I think from a storytelling side, they didn't have to do anything extremely unique. I mean, it's essentially a haunted mansion, right? That's if you look at it from the core side of it, which is not new in the horror area, but they put their own twist to it. And that's really where you start seeing legitimate jump scares. And they did that classic late 80s, early 90s mix. If you played the original Resident Evil, it's cut in scenes of real actors, and it is just absolutely corny, and it is hilarious. But then you jump into it and you're in this very wide open space. And I think for the limitations that they had back then at the time period, they did great, because I recently learned that the reason why it's laid out with tank controls and in the fixed camera perspective was they didn't really generate a background. All they did was generate your character and the moving objects. Everything else is on a flat stuck background. So they didn't have to generate a new scene every time. And I thought that was a genius method of creating a large environment for the time period. But let's get into what really breaks down and attracts people, story-wise. So Resident Evil follows, what is it, Alpha Team, or is it Bravo Team? I can't remember at this point. I think it's Bravo Team. Alpha Team gets wiped out.
Yeah.
Right? And they go out there, they find the crashed helicopter, and they get chased off by zombie dogs, which is frightening by themselves. And then they end up in the mansion itself. What was your experience the first time? Did you play the original first, or did you play the remake on the GameCube?
I played the original first.
Okay.
And it was terrifying. I scared quit several times. just at the beginning. It took a while and a lot of courage to get through that game. And it was a whole new experience in gaming because before then I had like an SNES 8-bit. When it got to like the late 90s or early 90s, with 3D graphics, it became a whole new experience.
And see, my experience was actually a little bit different. So I started with the GameCube of the original one. My first Resident Evil title was Nemesis.
Oh, dang.
So I went Nemesis and then played the first game through the GameCube, went back, tried to find the original, and I still had an old PlayStation. So I found the original, played it, and then went back and played 2. So I played it out of order back then. But I finally got all the storylines. And I think that, graphics aside, the story still works because it's essentially a corporate espionage story where it goes wrong, right? Their lab, which is the mansion, you don't realize until later on. There's the underground section that is housing all the weird experiments, and the mansion itself is a front, and it basically works as a hotel for the lab scientists, right? So do you want to talk about how they unfold the story for the player as they go through?
Yeah. So you're either like, Chris or Jill, and you start out. And I think there's if you pick one character, the game's a little easier, and pick another, it's a little harder. Because I think you start out with different material. I wanted to play it a little bit, but I didn't have time to refresh my memory. But I remember that if you start with one character or not, or the other, the game's a little different for you, story-wise and also difficulty-wise. I think one of the most shocking things is the betrayal from Albert Wesker.
Yeah.
Because it also had like a very deep story that left you like, this is supposed to be a video game. What's going on? What this guy's doing to you?
Yeah, no, you're fine. So essentially, how does the story unfold for the character, like for the player as they're playing through? So you mentioned that, there's 2 different starting options. You can play as Chris or Jill, and the story slightly changes depending on who you play as. The overall story still plays out the same. And to your point, it is a little bit more difficult to play as Chris. I think what it was is he gets less carry space. He doesn't. Maybe I'm wrong. It's been a long time since I played the original. I don't think he gets the grenade launcher at all. And I can't remember if it's GameCube only or if it's the original as well. But he has the lighter, which is more beneficial on the harder difficulties than it was in the easier ones. And then he can't play the piano, which is very important for a segment in the game to progress the story. So he has to find a different route because of the piano. And then you mentioned the betrayal that ultimately happens with one of the team members. So essentially, grand story-wise, for anybody who hasn't played through the original or even the GameCube version, you find out that there is a member on the team that goes in there named Albert, and he betrays the team. He was a part of the research team that was there at the mansion, and he went there to get combat data for some of the weird biological weapons that they were creating. But what I think is really interesting in developing the story, and I'm sorry I stole your question.
No, that's okay.
Helping you lead down a rabbit hole here, is there's that overall story, and you can get that by just playing the game, right? And if you don't go around looking for anything else, you still get a story. But the real story, at least in my opinion, is all the little information that paints the picture of what happened and what happened after the outbreak. And you only find that by finding diaries and journals and recordings and research logs throughout the lab and the mansion. And I think that is more memorable to me than anything else, because that's where we get the itchy tasty story, right?
Oh my gosh, the itchy tasty story. Yeah.
And we have to tell people what the itchy tasty story is. Do you want to tell the audience what the itchy tasty story is? how I have to do it.
Yes, you do.
This is just going to be me lecturing you for like the next hour on. So Itchy Tasty is a diary journal that you find in one of the researcher's bedrooms, and he's already been infected, and he's documenting how something's been, there's an outbreak. They think it's the T virus. I don't think they specify right at the beginning there, but he's sick and he doesn't know it yet. But as you keep going through his journal, he confirms, yeah, I'm getting sick. And then it shows how he slowly loses his humanity. And it gets to the point where he's like, if you've ever taken pre-workout, how he's starting to get that itchy feeling and he's scratching at himself. And then we have to assume, because the way he's writing it, that he's taking flesh off of himself and he's starting to eat himself, which also leads to why the zombies look the way they do. Is, some of them look like they're missing a lot more than just what something else would have done to them if he got bit once or twice. That there's implied that as you become sicker, you start to eat yourself if you can't get to other people. So I'll let you go on. What was your favorite journal entry that you found through the first game?
Itchy Tasty. That was iconic.
There's somebody did I can't remember the group out there. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to tag them because I can't remember who it is. I think I follow them on Facebook, but they did a live action replay of Itchy Tasty, and it's pretty phenomenal.
I've never seen that. I need to see that.
Yeah, if I can find it after this, I will absolutely send it to you.
That journal was probably the most disturbing because, again, like with the first Resident Evil, all this content was new. Like I've never seen it before. And so reading that story, it was the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, I can't think of another game at that time period that was as dark. Maybe I'm wrong, but Resident Evil also spurred off a lot of other similar survival horror.
Dino Crisis?
Yeah, Dino Crisis came much later, but I'm also like, I think Parasite Eve to some level also gained some of their concept. I think they were at least very similar at time frames, but I think it would be very hard pressed to say that there wasn't some influence between the two. And I think that really comes out. And then survival horror in itself just became its own genre after that. Do you want to walk them through? So we go through the mansion, trying to figure things out. There's a lot of puzzles, which is really fun. And I think probably a reason why it doesn't do well as a movie, but we'll get to that in just a second. So then they get into the lab section. Can you walk us through the lab section of Resident Evil?
Oh my gosh.
My problem is I remember the GameCube version much better because it was more, I played it at a friend's house. And it was more about us staying up late and playing it at his house than it was about Resident Evil. But I liked Resident Evil. So sometimes I think about which one is which, and I get the two confused. I don't think the shark was in the original Resident Evil. I think that was in the GameCube only. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was only in the GameCube because the flooded level in the lab, I don't recall it being as significant in the original.
Definitely why.
Oh yeah, they had Plant 51. That's exact, and that is such, in my opinion, such a weird thing to include. And I always thought it was going to be a bigger. I thought it was going to be a boss fight, right? It wasn't. It was just a giant plant that got out of control.
It's been a while. Everything is like blank.
Well, we know it's a plant, right?
Yeah, it was a plant.
It's all right. So Plant 51, from what I recall, it's essentially just a large plant that they were testing their virus. It had a genetic ability to manipulate the growth of the plant. And it went up this wall, and the characters need to get to the other side to access a different section of the laboratory. And the plant is blocking the door. And I was positive, because at this point, playing the original, I'd already played several Resident Evils before. I thought the plant was going to attack me or something, but it doesn't. It's just a really big plant. And I think it might have, like they said, that it might be poisonous, but it never does anything to the player. All you have to do is find some herbicide and kill the plant, which is, which is still.
That triggered a memory.
Yeah, right. So you find the herbicide, you kill the plant, and you get through the other side. And that's when you start to realize that the zombies are not the end product of the virus, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the game, a lot of the story wise is built up around the zombies and the virus, but that's ultimately not what the end goal was. That was an accident. It's basically waste processing from the
Mm-hmm.
virus. Um, Weak hosts become zombies, and that's just the end result. The overall goal was to create biological weapons that could be deployed and create monsters essentially that the military could use to save humans, but inflict a lot of damage onto a population. So that's when we start running into things like yawn. Do you want to tell everybody what yawn was in the attic?
Oh, again, I'm blanking.
The big snake.
Big snake. Not going well for me.
It's all right. I ambushed you with all this. So for anybody who's not knowing, we didn't plan any of this. It was just a conversation. It's a giant snake. That's what it is. I can't remember the type of snake they used. I think it was some type of venomous snake. Can't say poisonous because got to use the right term here. But it's so big, the venom isn't even the biggest problem. It can just swallow you whole in one bite. And that is just one of the attempts to create a biological weapon, right? And I guess if in a sci-fi world, having a giant snake, if you could control it, would be very beneficial. Like, you couldn't have tunnels anymore because you could just send a snake in there and eat everybody that's inside there or poison them. And then we also get to later on the hunters, right? So we run into hunters. Was that the first game?
Those are those with the long claws.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like it's the first game, but that might just be the GameCube version. I feel like it was the original game, though.
I want to say they are.
Because I remember in the GameCube version, they attack Rebecca.
Yeah.
So, I love how they built the story up, though. It starts as just a simple crash land. You're stuck in a mansion. You're trying to survive inside the mansion, and then it becomes a mystery game. Essentially, you're trying to figure out what happened there, right? And then you start finding out not only what happened in the mansion, but you also start finding out what happened to your buddies that crash landed before you. So you run into Rebecca. I can't remember the other guy's name that you run into in the garden. And then you start realizing that it's not just zombies. There's crows that don't like you. There's a giant snake in the attic. There's biological monsters, the hunters that are walking around, the giant plant, obviously. So then you find the ultimate end goal, right? Like right around when Wesker, but Albert betrays the team, and you find the big secret weapon. Do you want to tell the audience what the secret weapon was? Has a big heart on his chest.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember his name.
It's the tyrant.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us like what the difference between all the other monsters and the tyrant ultimately was? Aside from having his heart on the outside, which is probably the most video gamey portion that you could have.
Well, I mean, he had to shoot it so you can kill him. He needed a weak point. But a lot of the other monsters, like the dogs, crows, and stuff, they were like reanimated corpses, so to speak. He was a mutation that gone bad because they can't control him anymore.
Yeah, and that was ultimately the end goal, right? Was to make a weapon that you could control, a smart weapon.
Yeah.
Think of like a super soldier. So this dude's like 7-8 feet tall, claw, one hand, and I think in the game he is a Tyrant 02, and because if you read the journals, a 01, I might be wrong. There's going to be some Resident Evil nerd who watches this and is like, you guys are wrong. Let me tell you, and it's going to be fine. But I think they say like there was a bunch of failures before they got to the Tyrant, like the Tyrant series by itself. and then the one that you face off is like a certain generation of them, and Albert frees him. And this is where they're like, they try to throw you a curveball, and then they throw you a double curveball. So he releases him, thinking, at least publicly to everybody, that he can control the tyrant, and the tyrant can't be controlled. And then ultimately ends up stabbing Wesker in the stomach, which I'm just going to spoil it right now. Wesker planned that to happen somehow, and he knew that the tyrant stabbing him would make him, or allow him to get some of the genetic DNA from the tyrant so that he could become a tyrant himself. So we can go on a tangent about how that doesn't really make sense from the way they set it up. But then it goes on a chase. You're being chased by this big dude with a giant beating heart on the outside, but overall is basically a human tank, and chases the characters up to the top. And that's when we get the famous, standoff scene that every Resident Evil game has to have, where it's just you and the big dude at the end, and then somebody has to throw you a rocket launcher. There's always that cliche of take this and save the day by blowing it up. So let me ask, from a video game development side, since that's more your foray, what does Resident Evil do well, and then what does Resident Evil not do well?
I'm a little biased because I feel like Resident Evil was one of those jumping off points where it really revolutionized the genre, gaming, and storytelling for its time. I mean, what you mentioned earlier, how the background was just a flat image. They didn't really do that. I didn't know that about Resident Evil, but that explains a lot about how.
And there's going to be a Resident Evil nerd that just destroys me for saying this. I think for the time period, they did a great job, and I'm completely okay with not having tank controls and a fixed camera. There's a lot of hardcore fans out there that say they should go back to that, and I think you would lose a lot of people if they went back to a fixed camera angle, because it had its advantages for the time period, but there's a reason why they didn't do it in Resident Evil 4 or 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, right? But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but I agree. I completely agree. Like fixed camera, it was kind of annoying. I'm like, why is it like this at the point? Why? But understanding how they needed to do that to progress the game without like destroying any part of the story or any gameplay, it makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah, I read, I don't know if this is true, but I'm inclined to believe it, that Lady, I might be saying her name wrong, Lady Demetrius? I
know who you're talking about, the big lady.
Yes, the big lady. That there is more polygons on her rear end than there is in all of Resident Evil, the original release. So technology leap there between those, that 20 plus years, significant in video game developing. And again, to go back to why they did it with a fixed camera, is it allowed them not to have to render more, and they didn't have to constantly, there's not a lot of load times in the original game, and that's because they're not actually loading an environment. It's just a flat image that the character is running on the whole time. So what does Resident, going back to the original question, what does Resident Evil not do well?
That's actually a difficult question.
I'm not a video game developer. I would say, and we're only talking about the first game, for everybody who's listening. The one thing that it doesn't do well is there's frustrating moments by just the layout of it. I remember as a kid, there's times when it made sense to turn a certain way or try and point, and your character, you'd be wasting ammo. And in a survival game, that's not something you want to do. You have limited resources. That was a limitation of the time period. And whereas now you can make up for that more with skill. But again, I don't want to give you ideas or steal your answer.
No, but I kind of disagree with that, because that will, like, if you waste your ammo, you have to restart the game again. Makes the game longer. So some of those limitations makes you restart, makes the game longer, and makes you more satisfied with the purchase.
Yeah, that's potentially it. Or it could be like me, where I was a kid and I didn't understand things, so I just turned it off for a while and came back to it later. But again, that's just, I think ultimately that was a decision at the time period, because now if you waste ammo in like the remake of Resident Evil 4, it's your fault for wasting ammo. Whereas what I was trying to get at is, I can't tell if I'm shooting the wall or if I'm shooting the zombie, and I just can't tell because the way it was laid out.
Yeah.
But
there's one thing I did have a problem with is changing weapons.
Yeah, the original weapon system wasn't that efficient.
Like, I felt like that was completely unnecessary. Like, I mean, a lot of other games during that time, you had quick weapon switch, which is perfectly fine. Why did they intentionally do that? Is having to go into the menu, change your weapon, and then do stuff like that, and then add the ammo and stuff.
And thankfully they made up for it in later editions. But yeah, they stuck with that system for quite a while, and it came back in an Outbreak, which came out like 15 years after the original. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, some Resident Evil is going to get into the comments and be like, it came out 10.15 years. Oh no, I caused her to laugh too hard. She's going to have a coughing fit. So from a writing perspective, I'd say that what it does well is it enables multiple stories to be told in a format consistently, and it enables the reader or the player to go through it and want to unravel different sides of the story simultaneously. So again, we got the main story, surviving inside the mansion. Then we have unraveling what happened to everybody inside the mansion through journals, doctor logs, unraveling what happened to the crashed team before them by running into survivors and things of that nature, and then some monologues by Albert, which whichever way you want to go with how you feel about that, and then tying them together that Albert betrayed the original team. He's a researcher there at the facility, and their end goal was to make these biological weapons to be used by the military. And I think that was an excellent way to do it. What Resident Evil doesn't do well, in my opinion only, is they did a great job with starting with the zombies and it being, an accident, not being the intended product. But then when you see some of the things that the virus supposedly does, I'm like, the human body just doesn't do that. And we see that it becomes a bigger problem in, like, I'm going to say Resident Evil 2, with Birkin. Like, for you to grow to a larger size after injecting something, you have to take in something to justify the mass change. But they inject him, and it's like 15, 20 minutes later, he's like a giant monster walking around, and he's significantly larger. But you can get over it because it's a video game, right? I think that's where I have a problem. I like there to be some level of connection to our real world science, and I think that's the only place that I would say, from a writing and story wise, it kind of breaks me from the game. So the movie. Let's talk about the Mila Jovovich movie. I don't, I'll ruin it right now by saying that you could have called it anything else and not known that it was Resident Evil. Which is, if you guys did not know, I did a recent one on World War Z. Same situation. If you could have just taken the movie and retitled it something else, it would still be a zombie movie, and you don't need the source material. So why don't you tell us first from your side similarities and then a couple differences between the movie and the original game?
If the first movie, it was, it's hard to draw parallels between the two because they had to deal with, I think, a demon dog or a hunter, just one of them, and it was like it took the entire team to fight it.
Yeah. So
however, in the game,
it was a liquor, right?
Yeah.
So, which also doesn't show up until the second game, which is interesting that they use that as the boss in the movie.
And And they brought the virus in, the mutation and infection. Okay.
Did they use any characters from the game at all?
No, in the first movie, they did not
Yeah,
whatsoever.
which is insane. Like, why would you do that? You know, so you get a cast, right? Now, I get it. There are problems with adopting video games to movies, but I think the story still could have been used, and they didn't. And I know far too much about this, so I'm sorry I ambushed you. This is like that meme where it's like, I'm going to educate you on something that I'm way too educated about. So they originally had George A. Romero, which is the godfather of zombie movies, to direct Resident Evil. But he had one change he wanted to make. He wanted Chris not to be police or military. He wanted him to be a anti-government guy looking for his sister. The story probably could have worked, but I don't know if it was Capcom or somebody in the studio that they were going with. They didn't like that approach, so they got rid of him. There's a documentary out there on George A. Romero, and they talk about his attempts to get into Resident Evil. I highly recommend anybody to go out there and listen if they're interested in the movie side of it and how they kind of just mothballed a phenomenal director. But the problem is they turned Alice in Wonderland into a Resident Evil movie, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And the mansion in the game is like 2/3, maybe half. I'm going to say at least 2/3 if you're brand new to Resident Evil of your gameplay time. Because by the time you get to the labs, you're near the last act of the game and you're familiar with the controls. So things are going a little bit smoother. Not so with the movie. In the movie, you get like maybe 5 minutes of screen time in the mansion and we're in the laboratory, which is all very unusual as well.
Yeah. And I think even like the setting of the mansion and lab in the movie was not even like the same from the game, because they had to make Alice, the main character in the movie, some weird ninja type person.
Yeah.
That can handle these like genetically engineered monsters and stuff. Which was another thing about Resident Evil, is that you are normal people and you have to deal with this monstrosity.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest travesty, especially from the writing side, is that you take normal people. I mean, okay, we can say that they're not normal in the fact that they're a special operation unit from the police force, right? STARS, special tactics and rescue is what their acronym stands for. But they're still people. Whereas like Alice is like this super secret special trained agent, and she has amnesia at the beginning of the movie because of the mansion's defense mechanisms. And you get fed like bits of her story through her awakening, but it's still not Resident Evil. And they did change the lab, I mean, drastically. So it's kind of like a normal office, but it's underground. And there's thousands of people working there, not a few dozen like we were led to believe in the original, like the source material. And there's the AI computer, the Red Queen.
Yeah,
obsessed with removing people's heads.
That was like the choices they made were so interesting. I mean, if they wanted a good script, they could have used the journals. Like, I felt like the journals in the first game could have been made a movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you don't even have to like worry about how are you going to integrate the puzzles, how are you going to integrate the game progression into it. The story was being told in these journals that can ultimately be translated into film.
Yeah, and I think that's where, video games, they have great stories, and anybody who thinks that there's not art in video games, you're sorely mistaken. There are some phenomenal stories in there. But the problem is when they try and translate them to movies, you have a hard time of translating a story that's very solid, like told from a solitude point of view, into a movie, because you can't just have one person running around solving puzzles, right? It'd be insanely boring. You want some dialogue, you want some development, but there's a way to do it, and I don't feel like Resident Evil, the first movie, is a fine zombie movie. It's not Resident Evil from the source material. And, a lack of respect, I think, ultimately that comes out of it. Now, I don't, a lot of people say, well, yeah, but it spurred like 16 movies. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't, people like action movies. You could have called it any other thing and it would have been just as successful. You didn't have to bastardize a franchise, in my opinion.
And I also think the one movie that actually took reference images from the game, especially Nemesis, that was like the most low performing movie. I mean, I'm probably gonna get people gonna come for me for saying that too.
Yeah, I know that was the best one.
It was the best one for fans. But like, if you're a normal viewer, like film viewer, you wouldn't get the references. So you're like, well, why is people in the theater going crazy over the scene?
Yeah, they did Nemesis fine in the second movie. The issue I had with Nemesis was in the game, he was a true biologically, purposely developed weapon from the evil corporation, which is Umbrella. He was developed from their European labs to be a specialized assassination or destruction unit. Whereas in the movies, what they did was there's this guy that was helping his sister spy and steal information from Umbrella, and he shows up in the movie, and he also has amnesia because of the security system, and then he starts to have a romantic connection to Alice, and then right at the end he gets scratched by the liquor, and as he's being pulled away you see like tubes coming out of his arm, and that's the start of Nemesis for the movie. And then she becomes friends with it at the end in the second movie, which I was like, why did you do this? So
there's no friends in biological warfare.
There's a lot of weirdness. People are going to come out and say how amazing the movies were. They're fine as action movies. I just don't think they should have been Resident Evil movies, which then brings us to Welcome to Raccoon City, which was supposed to be the fan-based fan tribute to Resident Evil. And this is where everybody's going to get really upset. Overall, it probably was the best Resident Evil movie we're going to get when it comes to just Resident Evil. It still wasn't a great movie, but at least there was the characters that we wanted in it. What they did to Leon, though, was a travesty. But do you want to introduce them to Welcome to Raccoon City?
What was that?
Do you want to introduce the audience to Welcome to Raccoon City in case they're unfamiliar
with it? Welcome to Raccoon City. That was basically the film of Resident Evil 2, correct?
Yeah, with parts of 1 and 3 thrown into it.
Yeah. Leon was portrayed... I don't know if I can say it online, but he was not portrayed well.
Hey, this is my podcast. If you want to say a swear word, you go for it.
No, I'm going to say a cancel word.
Oh Lord! Oh my gosh! Don't say that. Yeah. He was a coward, which is not at all the way he was portrayed in the game. So
he was green in the game. He was just green. He was not like a coward.
Yeah, so we're jumping ahead on the game side, but story and development wise, Leon is a rookie cop. He just finished the academy, and he's on his way to his assignment, and it happens to be in Raccoon City. He's driving there, and he gets there right before the barricades get set up. So he stops at a gas station, and unbeknownst to him, the National Guard is setting up barricades behind him, and then he goes into Raccoon City, finds the police department. The city's overrun with zombies and monsters. In the movie Welcome to Raccoon City, he's already a cop there. He's a lazy cop that they relegate to desk duty, and he's asleep at the front desk, something like that, when they first introduce him. And he doesn't know how to use firearms, or he's uncomfortable using firearms. Like, there's a scene with him in the shotgun, like he doesn't know how to turn the safety off, something like that. I've seen the movie once. I saw it when it was in theaters, so there's that side of it. But they mix up the storytelling because they wanted to make sure the audience knew what was going on. And I think that really hurt the movie. I think they should have just chosen a game to tell the story and gone with that. because they tried to include so many characters and so much of the storyline, because there's parts of 3 like that just they stole from, but they didn't develop into. So in the movie, what they do is it's about the city outbreak, but they tell you through segments about how Alpha Team knew it was going to happen, and then they go off to the mansion, and that is told simultaneously about while the outbreak in the city is happening. And in the games, there's a couple of months between Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, which builds up the story a lot better as well from a writing side, because the team comes back and they're ostracized. They try to do a cover up, and the team has to go into hiding because they're treated as criminals. But there have been zombies in the forest from the mansion that were causing problems. They're reported as a cannibalistic serial killer cult group, like something of that nature. And then rats start getting infected. And then feeding that into 2, there's another well-known scientist that's trying to steal the virus because he feels like his life work is being jeopardized by what Umbrella's doing and Birkins. And Umbrella decides to assassinate him, and they don't do it well. They shoot him up. He drops a bunch of viruses into the sewer, which rats eat, and then they go on to infect people. And then I'm going to jump ahead a bunch of games. If you know about the Outbreak game, once he gets shot, he injects himself while he's dying with a different virus, the G virus. And then he goes off and he kills the team that was sent to assassinate him, causing more zombies underneath the city. And they, between the rats, the zombies in the forest, and the zombies in the sewers, it spreads throughout Raccoon City. And then we get Resident Evil 2, the game, which is where Leon happens to go to the police station as his first duty assignment, and finds out, hey, things are falling apart. Not so much in Welcome to Raccoon City. It feels like they told that story completely concurrent, and it's really disjointed just from a story side. And I think that really hurt the overall rating of it, because I've seen a lot of people say that the Mileage of Jovovich movies are better, which I don't agree with from a being a game fan side, but I understand from a storytelling side.
Yeah,
that's very true. So I talked a lot there. I'll let you take a second and say your bit to it.
It's okay. My throat is killing me.
It's that time.
So I saw Welcome to Raccoon City once as well, and so like bits or pieces are coming back, and yeah, it was really. If I remember correctly, like Albert Wesker and Chris Redfield, they had a really strange relationship in the movie compared to the game.
Yeah, they changed the dynamic of the entire game for sure. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the fact that some of the characters generally don't look like the game characters. I know a lot of people point that out about Leon.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't bother me so much as completely changing the dynamic of the team.
Yeah.
In the game, it's implied that while there's certain playfulness that comes along with just being tight in a group, but they don't really act as professionals. And I can say that comfortably, being around some professionals in my life, both in the military side, law enforcement, and the healthcare side. They all kind of come off as rookie cops that are just senior enough to be in a secondary assignment, whereas stars in the game series, they're written as kind of like a privatized version of a SWAT team, and they justify. There's it sounds weird to say that because America, as far as I know, doesn't have a privatized SWAT team that you can hire out there. But Raccoon City never has been well financed, and there's documents to show in the game, if you dive into all those journals out there, that there's a private company that helps fund stars because there's a need for special tactics and rescue, what is called SWAT, because that's essentially what they act as, a little bit more advanced because they also do rescue missions. And then we find out a lot of that money came from Umbrella, which is the company that's doing all the evil experimentation. The movies don't touch on any of this, and if they do make references to it, it's not enough for the audience to appreciate. And I think that hurts it from a movie perspective. I'll definitely say from a design perspective that Welcome to Raccoon City had more respect for the source material. Birkin looked like Birkin. I can believe that was the movie take of Birkin. But they tried to cram so much into a small movie. They should have just chosen one game to tell the story too.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about Welcome to Raccoon City?
There was one thing they did that was interesting. It was when I forgot which character was looking for another character.
The little girl.
What?
Looking for the little girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she went to a house and found a mutated woman.
Yeah, they told that side. Go ahead. You go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was actually surprising because that is not even that was
that's from the GameCube version. So
yeah,
for everybody who's not, because there's going to be a lot of people who I know listen to this aren't familiar with either story. So the original Resident Evil, very streamlined. We already talked about it, but the GameCube version, when it came out a couple of years later, I say a couple of years, quite a whole generation of consoling later, they added a lot more to it, and they included I can't remember her name now. Lisa Trevor, that's her name.
Yes.
They included Lisa Trevor, which is like a side story of a woman who lived near the mansion in the original game, and her family was murdered. There's a whole conspiracy about how they were abducted and pulled into it. And Lisa escaped, but she was mutated terribly, but she was able to retain some of her human consciousness, and she attacked the researchers and land keepers of the mansion. And there's this whole when you read through the game, there's this whole backstory about all these characters and how they're connected. And the movie, they just throw her into this random, was it the orphanage or the hospital? I can't remember because it's been
the orphanage.
Yeah, and it's weird that she was where did that come from?
Yeah, that was surprising. But it also gave kind of X-Files vibes to it.
Yeah, I can see the X-Files vibes too.
Yeah.
And memories being spurred now. They completely changed the setup for Chris and his sister. So
yeah, that too.
Yeah, in the original story, Chris obviously is in the first game. Because he goes into hiding after the first one because they're being treated like criminals.
Yeah.
That's how his sister, Claire Redfield, goes to Raccoon City and meets Leon by accident, looking for her brother, thinking he's at the police station. In the movie, they're orphans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this backstory to them being orphans, and then they were being experimented on. They didn't know it. That I felt like that was unnecessary.
That was a little too much.
Yeah, that was completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, because I think one of the key things about Resident Evil is that you had no idea all this stuff was going on, and then you stumble into a nightmare. But they keep trying to change it where the characters involved in it are actually a part of it as well.
I feel like Hollywood feels like they have to Hollywoodize it to make it where everybody is a little bit darker. It doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah,
I think some of the best, I'm going to just say zombie movies in general, involve normal people going against the extreme.
Yes,
I mean, Night of the Living Dead, random strangers hanging out. Dawn of the Dead, you got a reporter, a couple cops, and a helicopter pilot. Day of the Dead, you have researchers and soldiers. But these are all just normal people in their normal jobs doing, what they have to survive. And then we can go into the modern century and say 28 days later, you got a delivery dude who wakes up in a hospital, right? You got the entire first season of The Walking Dead. I'm not going to talk about the other seasons because they just kind of built that story out. But that's a story for another day. Not Resident Evil, though. For whatever reason, every time somebody's like, I got to make a Resident Evil movie, they just want to stray away from the stories that are already exist. And I don't know why, because I think Welcome to Raccoon City, and somebody out there can correct me, they had more backing from Capcom than the Jovovich movies did. So I don't know why they have to go so far down a rabbit hole with changing it.
Yeah, it's
So let me ask this. If you could go and like Capcom reached out to you and said, we're going to put you in charge of making a movie, how would you do a Resident Evil movie?
Well, I have to decide which story to tell. Because first of all, each game has to be broken down. You have to strip the puzzles and stuff like that because, you know, it's going to be boring sitting there and watching someone do a puzzle because you're going to be like, I can do that better than that person. So you have to strip away all those things. You have to strip away every game mechanic that makes it into that game. You're going to have to just take the raw story and then decide how you're going to break it up. Because a game like Resident Evil, you have the journals, you have the main game story, you have the sub-journals, and then you have your characters in all those categories. You only have like 120 minutes to tell a story in a film.
Yeah, that's a big limiting factor to movies.
Yeah. So if either one of those categories can be told in that time, maybe go with that direction of what it is of the story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've never written a script for a movie, so put that with a,
soon you will.
Someday, maybe. So take that with a grain of salt. I would absolutely, if I needed to do the first game, I would absolutely just make it about the team coming in to the mansion to do their investigation. We can do the crash or not. They just have to get to the mansion. And then from there, I would just lay it out that it's more about learning what happened through the journals. And you can do that with great flashbacks. Like when they find the documents and they're going through, you can cut and show those journals. And so you can have two lines of characters that the audience cares about, the team, and then, what's happening with the mansion and why did everybody end up dying. And I think you can just tell the story that way. I think as well, another way they can spin that is they could just start with Resident Evil 2 and start with Raccoon City because there's more to that. Or better yet, they could just do something that's not tied directly to the game, so like do the outbreak side of it and do it from people that are surviving it. And you can tie it to events that happened to the game, like the Raccoon Police Department and things like that. So that brings us to the second game. It feels like, we're sitting at an hour now. So if we need to go, you just raise your hand. We'll do a second segment, schedule that. Resident Evil 2, similar to what Aliens was to Alien, in my opinion, was a great sequel. And we can talk about the remake of the second game, and we can talk about the original second game, because they're both just perfect for each other. So instead of trying to be Resident Evil 2 took that formula and expanded it and made it a little bit more in depth. So we talked about Leon. He shows up, rookie cop. He doesn't know what's happening. Gets stuck early on, has to make his way on foot to the police department. He doesn't know why everything's falling apart. And the police department at this point has already been overrun. There's a handful of police officers still alive that he finds throughout the area. But in general, monsters are inside the police department and the fight's been lost. And then we have Claire. So Claire is the sister to Chris, who is on the STARS team from the original game. And she's searching for him, hoping to figure out why he hasn't been talking to her. And then obviously he's not in the game. She runs into Leon, and they both have their own story. So I'll just turn it to you from the video game perspective. What was it that Resident Evil 2 did right in expanding from what the original game laid out for them?
Well, with 2, they established some key Resident Evil mechanics, like the puzzles and the weapon system, which I really hate. and storytelling. What was the question again?
What did they do right from a video game mechanic side?
Oh. They kept everything true from the first game, mechanic-wise, with a different story that progressed with like different threats level and sorry, the cold is just like wiping me out.
I completely understand. I'll say from the writing side, and when I say writing, because obviously it's a video game, the story to it, they did a good job of continuing telling the story through journals, videos, audio clips that you find throughout. And this time, instead of the mansion like we had in the first game, you get two sides of it. You get what happened to the police department, and you also get newspapers, so you get a little bit of what happened to the city as well. So we start with, hey, there's cannibalistic murders happening in the mountains. There's rat infestations that are going around. And then you start seeing how the police department's like, hey, we have blockades set up and they're being overrun and we're closing in the perimeter. So you get this idea of the noose is getting tighter. And then the last stand at the police department, which, if you follow in the last couple officers, one of them is Marvin, which is the officer that greets Leon early on in the game. And then, third half or last act of the game, there is another laboratory that Leon ends up in. He goes through the sewers to try and escape the police department, gets into the laboratory that way by accident. Maybe it's intentional. Depending on how you want to look at it. And then we get how the laboratory in the city also added to the outbreak that was happening above and all the chaos that happened inside that laboratory with those researchers in there. So I think they did a great job of continuing that. And I'll also say that they did, just like Aliens did for Alien, they added the next level, because you either have to do one or two things when you make a sequel. You either have to add something to make it more extreme than the first, or you have to be your own thing. So in Aliens, it became its own thing. It's an action movie. Alien was a horror movie. Resident Evil 2, they added to it in that they said, okay, well, we know zombies. That's done. We still need to have them. Central portion to it. Hunters, they're going to be around. But now they're like, hey, the plant thing from the first game, it needs to be cool. So in the lab section, they added a plant that turns people into different types of zombies. And they become like those, I can't remember what they call them now, like vine people. That was interesting. But the most important part in the police department is they added the liquor. And the liquor is a unique monster that it's technically a zombie, but it's a zombie that's eaten enough flesh that it's sparked another evolution that turns it into this like four-legged crawling thing with a long tongue that it uses like a spear, and its brain is popping out of its skull, and there's like pink flesh around it. It has claws on its hands and feet, but it's blind. And that's a great mechanic that they implemented in it, because if you don't know what's going on, your initial instinct is to run, which then it hunts you down faster because it can outrun you, or you shoot it, which attracts it to you. But all you have to do is walk through it and be quiet, and the creature doesn't know you're there. And you only know this if you're paying attention to the journal entries. And there's like one where a cop, he's like, this thing can't see. You have to be quiet walking around, and they tease you with it. So like you're walking through a hallway, and I remember this is in the original and in the remake. You're walking through a hallway, and there's a fire in the background, and in the window, one of the lickers crawls across the window, and that it was so creepy. Like, what the heck was that? And then a little bit later, you run into it. So, 2, in my opinion, was the better of the two games, just because it has a little bit more. But it's still true to the original.
And I believe 2 was also when they added, I forgot the guy's name, but his submissions, the one with the gas mask.
Oh, Hunk. Yeah.
Yeah. And like he was like they introduced him, and then he's kind of been like his own thing ever since.
Yeah, and they created a whole sub genre to which it goes back to like storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had this guy, and they call him Hunk, which is an acronym for Human Unit Never Killed, something like of that nature. And he's an Umbrella operative that you never see his face. He wears a gas mask, and he has all the tactical gear. And we learn later that he was on the team that was sent to kill Birkin. Mm-hmm. And somebody on the team made a mistake. It wasn't him. There was a new guy on the team, shot Birkin because they were supposed to take him alive. And that spurred Birkin becoming a monster because he injected himself and then helped hurry the spread of the disease across Raccoon City. Then they send Hunk back to try and get the last sample. And at this point, he already knows the city's going to get hit with a nuclear bomb. And he gets out just in time to get the sample and fly away into the sunset. But we don't know anything else about this guy. And the only reason this story exists is because people really liked him. They thought he was cool. And I think that's a phenomenal decision from a storytelling side to show some unanswered questions and answer it with a fan favorite. So great choice from Capcom. But movies never touched on him. They kind of just started with aesthetic and then never used it.
No, it's good. They probably would have ruined it anyway.
He would have taken his mask off and we'd all have been upset.
Yeah.
The Master Chief thing. Like, you can't have a guy with a cool looking mask and let him take the mask off. It's not in the rules. So we're running out of time. Resident Evil 2. Anything else you want to say from that side? We didn't spend nearly enough time on it since we burned all the time on Resident Evil 1.
I have to say that Ada and Leon, Ada's a new character in Resident Evil 2, and Leon's relationship was actually probably one of the best relationships that they introduced in gaming.
Yeah, what a toxic relationship for somebody who doesn't date, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell us about Ada and some people say Ada.
I don't know.
Whichever one you want to go with. Tell us about her and Leon.
Well, she's a double agent, I believe. Well, like you learn a lot about her later on. She is in Resident Evil 2. She is there to steal either documents or a virus. I forgot what she was stealing there, but she runs into Leon. She teases him around, and I'm getting mixed up between the remake and the original. But because I think they changed it in the remake.
A little bit, yeah. So she, in both, she claims to be an FBI agent, or an agent that's working for some type of legitimate government, right? And it's not until later that we realize that she's not. She's sent originally by Umbrella to get some of their samples back, which ultimately, depending on if you play you're going off just the original story or the remake story, that Hunk gets if you go by the remake, or she gets after we think that she died. And Leon, not understanding that he's being played, accidentally helps her through it because he thinks that she's a legitimate person, and then thinks that she dies until she comes back later on in the series.
Yeah,
it's a convoluted story with a lot of are they a thing or are they not, because they flirt with each other, right?
Yeah, they do.
And I don't know. I'm terrible at flirting. So you tell me, like, is there a connection from Ada, or is she just stringing this dude along?
I don't know. I don't know anything about flirting as well.
What? But I thought women were the masters to flirting. I've been lied to again.
Yeah, it happened because we are not. Last time somebody flirted with me, I had no idea, and I thought they were being rude.
Well, look, that's a guy thing to say that, and I think that's just my autism. So we'll just go with the tism beats us to it. There has to be some level of connection because Ada does help Leon several times, and in other scenes, she is painted and developed as a cold-blooded agent. I'm going to say that. I didn't want to say killer. but that she doesn't really generally care about other people. But for whatever reason, she has this soft spot for Leon. And it becomes more apparent later on in a different game in the series.
Yeah.
But those are two very interesting characters. And I feel like Capcom's bashful about putting too much about either one of them together. And I say that because let's jump all the way up. The next time we run into them is 4. That's when it really gets solidified. And then 6, they're like, we got a bunch of characters. Let's not focus too heavily on just 1 or 2. And I'm not going to talk about 6 because it kind of hurt my feelings when I All right. So again, we're going to end it off right there. My name's Sean. I'm your host with Birds with Words. Today we have Faith, and she has a copy of my wonderful book. Thank you. Again, author of Sinner's Pass. I hope that gave you plenty of thrills while you read it. Faith, can you tell us a little bit about anything else you want or where they can find your work?
Yes, you can find me at oneimonsters.com. There you'll get updated on content there.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Faith. And
Thank
we can
you.
send another one up and talk about the rest of the games.